The story of Shanquella Robinson's passing is heartbreaking and incensing, to say the least. Ever since I heard about it, I've been glued to social media, refreshing my timeline every few seconds, looking for breaking news bearing a modicum of good news. And as much as the story twists and turns with every video I watch, still, no official word of an arrest. While there is a lot of new information and even more misinformation breaking in this story every day, when I heard the news that the police report was released, I thought finally we were going to get to some truth about what really happened. But after hearing the details of the report, reading many articles, and listening to numerous interviews, I had more questions than answers. So I thought I would do a little digging of my own and found some pretty damning evidence. Things that no one seems to be reporting on. One thing is sure, the police report is rife with timelines that directly conflict with the death certificate. And what is even more glaring is that there was not one single successful medical remedy from the doctor who, as it states in the police report, literally observed Shanquella's bruised and swollen face, eyes and busted lips, looking for signs of responsiveness for almost 3 hours, but made no mention of its physical condition. But listen to what Nazeer had to say about that.
When I walked in there, I didn't really notice the knot on her head until the nurse pointed it out. I did see the bump on her lip. She did have a blood vessel bust in her eye.
Did you hear that? He said he didn't notice the bruises on her face until the nurse, which we all know was a doctor, pointed it out to him. It was an intentional omission, not one that was missed because of the color of her skin. Nazeer divulged more information than we first thought, but he also knows much more than he wants us to believe. And we're going to get into it. We're going to get into what the friends, also known around social media as the Cabo Six, what they did to hide Shanquella's death well before Nazeer and the doctor arrived. It's absolutely heartbreaking. And we're going to talk about where the alcohol poisoning story came from, why Nazeer knows more than he's telling us, and why the doctor, police, and municipal authorities would risk their careers, let the friends flee, and go so far as to lie on the police report. And finally, I'm going to lay out a step-by-step timeline for what may have happened. In that timeline, I'll point to a specific action that, according to experts, was actually the death blow. I will propose a more precise time that I believe the death blow was delivered and show another person who may have also witnessed by watching when that beautiful soul was murdered. But before we get into that, please be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on breaking news, updates to this story, and so much more. Let's get into it. On October 28th, a vibrant 25-year-old entrepreneur, Shanquella Robinson, traveled for birthday celebrations with 6 of her friends: Dejanay Jackson, Khalil Cook, Elise Hyatt, Winter Donovan, Malik Dyer, and Nazeer Wiggins. They stayed at the swanky beach club resort Cabo Villas in Fundadores, San Jose de los Cabos, Baja California Sur. And in less than 24 hours of their arrival, their lives would be forever changed. Shanquella Robinson was found dead in her hotel room, Villa Linda 32. Around 7 p.m. Eastern on October 29th, Shanquella's mom, Salamandra Robinson, received a frantic phone call from Shanquella's friends saying Shanquella was not feeling well and that she had too much to drink.
When I got the call, I was out eating. It would have been about 6 or 7.
Shortly after that, the friends called back stating that Shanquella had died from alcohol poisoning. But where did this determination come from without a doctor's diagnosis?
They told me that Kula was sick and she was showing signs of alcohol poisoning. They got that because one of their friends told them that they were seeing signs. So she was showing symptoms of alcohol poisoning.
Did you hear that? They called their friends for help with the alcohol poisoning story before calling for medical help. Why? The Cabo Six immediately packed up their things and returned to the States early, leaving it up to Shanquella's family to find her remains on their own. Here is her father stating he Googled funeral homes to find his daughter.
So me and my brother got on that phone and started Googling all the funeral homes that was over in Mexico, Cabo. So we came up with funeral home Riviera, funeral home over there.
Khalil Cook, who was said to be Shanquella's best friend, remained close to the family, making numerous and daily visits to Salamandra's home. One of the visits was to return Shanquella's luggage and her personal effects, but all of the visits were to stay up to date on what the family knew.
He came to the house 4 days in a row until he found out we knew what the autopsy said. Haven't seen him since.
A couple of days after the friends returned to North Carolina, rumors about a fight began to swirl among Shanquella's college friends. In one of Khalil's visits with Salamandra, he brought with him two of the women from the trip, Dejanay Jackson and Winter Donovan. Together, they had dinner, grieved with, and consoled the family. When Salamandra questioned them about the fight rumor, the friends stood firm on their story. It was alcohol poisoning, and that no fight had occurred on the trip. Salamandra said when she talked to the friends individually, each of them was telling different stories. According to the family, the Mexican authorities had corroborated the alcohol poisoning story, at least until November 3rd, when the death certificate was released and revealed a very tragic truth: that Shanquella had suffered a broken neck and cracked spine and died from a severe spinal cord injury, atlas luxation, within 15 minutes of sustaining the injury. Her official time of death was 3 p.m. Saturday, October 29th. And wouldn't you believe, shortly after the certificate's release, the friends deactivated their social accounts and telephone numbers, and all communications with the friends stopped. Around November 16th, a video emerged on social media showing Shanquella being brutally assaulted by one of the friends, Dejanay Jackson, while the other friends sat by and watched. Video recorded the incident. In the viral video that was recorded and leaked by one of the friends, you can see Shanquella naked, being punched, kicked, kneed in her face, and tossed around by her neck like a rag doll. The blows were audible, vicious, quick, and numerous. Shanquella did not fight back. You can hear Shanquella verbally decline to fight back when one of the friends recording the assault asked,
"Quilla, can you at least fight back?"
Then another voice in the room says, "Why's she not fighting back?" Many have speculated this to be Winter Donovan, but the more I listen to it, the more I'm convinced it was the second male, speaking in an elevated tone. The bearded man whose profile is visible from second 14 to second 17. The camera is located behind him, so his voice is directed away from the camera and is picking up more of the acoustics in the room. The woman's voice sounds much closer to the camera and can be heard much more clearly at second 16 when she says, The assault video shows at least 3 of the Cabo Six were in the room watching, 2 men and 1 woman. The cameraman, who is speculated to be Malik Dyer, because when Salamandra was asked, did she recognize the voice in the video, she said no. And to the left front of the screen, you can catch glimpses of another bearded man, who is said to be Khalil Cook, who was identified as the man seen in the video by Tequila, Shanquella's sister. One of Shanquella's college friends anonymously sent the video to the family, and they grew suspicious. Growing more suspicious about what had happened to Shanquella, her parents requested pictures from the Mexican coroner's office, and it confirmed their worst fears. Swollen eyes, busted lips, a knot on her head, and severe bruising on her back and neck, obvious signs of trauma. Shanquella's body was later flown home to North Carolina, where her parents could personally observe the devastating sight. This case had gone unnoticed and without media coverage until investigative reporter Gerardo Zuniga of Metropoli MX posted the now viral video of the assault and published his article exposing it 19 days following Shanquella's death. Thank you, sir. And on Thursday, November 24th, the PGJE Attorney General Daniel De La Rosa Anaya issued an arrest warrant for the aggressor. Attorney De La Rosa Anaya is Mexico's prosecutor for this case. On the 24th, the AG also did an interview that was published in El Independiente newspaper, a local Baja California Sur newspaper. In it, he makes a very revealing statement, one that gives us more hints about the timeline. Let's take a look. It's been translated from Spanish to English. In the interview, the AG is speaking here. He said that the reserve and discretion with which the investigation was handled was very important, since at first, the group of friends, all from North Carolina, United States, made it look like an accidental death by falling in the bathroom because she was drunk. Let me repeat that. The AG himself said that the reserve and discretion with which the investigation was handled was very important, since at first, the friends made it look like an accidental death by falling in the bathroom because she was drunk. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? The AG himself tells us they tried to cover up what they had done to Shanquella first before calling for medical help. That was the first thing they did. So if you had any doubt about this detail, you now see it confirmed by the AG in black and white. So, my first question, why? Why would anyone create a scene or make up a story for how someone died if they aren't already dead? For them to make it look like an accidental death, it means they were trying to explain or cover up the current condition, death. My next question is when? When was, quote unquote, at first? It had to be before anyone saw what was going on, right? That means anyone, including the cleaning staff and the doctor, anyone outside of the Cabo Six. That was their only shot for the alibi that someone, quote unquote, found her in the bathroom to work. But for the existence of death, would the friends have had a need to make it look like an accidental death by falling in the bathroom because she was drunk? I think not. Nazeer even told us what they did.
So by that time, I skipped another thing. Quilla wasn't found dead. She wasn't found dead. The maids found her slumped over the toilet in her room. That's what they did find her, slumped over her toilet in her room. That's what I was told. Quilla was not dead when I got there.
Nazeer was the last of the 6 to arrive. And as he says, he was told a story. But you will see later in the video that while he might not have been there for the crime, he participated in the cover-up. My next question is, how? How do you think they did what they did? How did they make it look like an accidental death by falling in the bathroom because she was drunk? By moving the body. Nazeer told us himself that he moved her body.
And all that. So I'm sitting right next to her the whole time. I was crossing my heart, I hope it out. There the whole time in the game room, and then they was talking about cooking, so we made it to the living room. I cut on some soft music, sitting with her, rubbing her head, just chilling, waiting until the nurse came, because that's what I was informed that was happening.
But what Nazeer failed to mention is how he moved her to the living room. How did he do that alone? Did he do that alone? No, he said, we made it to the living room. And what he wants us to believe is that he and Shanquella walked to the living room, when instead it was he and the group that moved her lifeless body to the living room. How does someone who is not responsive walk to the living room? He wants us to assume she was alive. Poor Nazeer. A liar often tells truths. And most people dismissed his admissions on his Instagram Live because it was jumbled and hard to follow. But if you listen closely, he gave us exactly what we needed to know. Around November 22nd, Geraldo Zuniga released the police report, which had also been hidden from public view. The police report states, at 2:13 p.m. October 29th, the friends called the Villa concierge for medical help. At 3:15, Dr. Carolina Beatriz Ornelas Gutierrez from the American Medical Center arrived. She states that she found a female with stable vital signs, but dehydrated, could not speak, and appearing to be inebriated. Gutierrez was told by the friends that Shanquella drank a lot of alcohol. Gutierrez suggested that they transfer Shanquella to the hospital, but the friends insisted she be treated in the villa. And then Gutierrez attempted an IV, but was unsuccessful. At 4:20, Shanquella had a seizure lasting less than a minute with sphincter relaxation, at which time Winter Donovan dials 911 requesting an ambulance. Gutierrez states that Shanquella exhibited difficulty breathing, decreased pulse, and at 4:49 p.m., Gutierrez stops feeling a pulse and started CPR with the help of one of the friends for a total of 14 CPR sessions until the ambulance arrives. At 5 p.m., first responders were summoned by radio to respond to a convulsing patient. At 5:25, first responders arrived on the scene and delivered 5 doses of adrenaline and 6 unsuccessful AED discharges. She had no pupillary reflexes and no asystole pulse. At 5:57, Dr. Gutierrez declared Shanquella deceased from cardiac arrest. At 6:35 p.m., the first responders contacted the public ministry. First responders reported the facts in the report and received instructions to wait for the ministerial police. Do you see the problem with this? The death certificate says she died at 3 p.m., and the police report says she died at 5:57 p.m. That's a huge discrepancy. Let's talk about the time of death because the doctor on the scene couldn't possibly know Shanquella's underlying issues if the Cabo 6 didn't tell her. So her details are completely off, but in it are some truths as well, holding true that a liar uses truths to validate his lies. The thing to note about the police report versus the autopsy is that the police report is made up of personal statements given by the parties on the scene. It can be full of misinformation, especially if the parties have something to hide. The time of death on an autopsy is an estimation, not an exact time. The medical examiner uses information from the police report, the internal temperature and condition of the body, the location where the body was found, and many other factors to determine the time of death. If you're going to trust one, I will give more credence to the autopsy since it takes into consideration statements from the police report as well as actual science to make the determination. But it is a range, not an exact time. And the death certificate's cause of death comes from the autopsy, if one is done. But did you notice anything missing from the police report? There was no mention of Shanquella's physical injuries. How? How does a doctor who stared at her face for nearly 3 hours not notice a swollen, bloodshot eye, busted lip, and knot on her head? She lies. And our friend Nazeer tells us she did.
When I walked in there, I didn't really notice the knot on her head until the nurse pointed it out. I did see the bump on her lip. She did have a blood vessel bust in her eye.
Did you hear Nazeer say that he didn't notice until the doctor who he called a nurse pointed that out to him? This doctor's report completely conflicts with the Mexican death certificate, which states that Shanquella's cause of death was a severe spinal cord injury and atlas luxation, and that she died at 3 p.m. and it had no mention of alcohol in Shanquella's system. After extreme pressure from Black social media, the Baja California Sur AG's office reopened the case as a femicide, a gender-based murder against women. And he launched an investigation into the 6 friends, for which an arrest warrant for one of the Cabo 6 was issued through Interpol on November 28th. The doctor is reported to also be under investigation for omissions of obvious signs of trauma and direct conflict with the Mexican death certificate. And the 2 responding officers who failed to follow protocol and allowed the friends to flee without issue are also under investigation. It is reported that in Mexico, when there is a body involved, if you are on the scene and someone dies, the police are to arrest you until the situation is clarified. None of the Cabo 6 were arrested. So you can understand where I'm going with the timeline, let's start with the bombshell interview that the lead attorney did with the investigative reporter Gerardo Zuniga, who is the one who is responsible for all of the inside details we are so fortunate to now have in this story. He posted the viral video, released the police report, and really helped to propel this story. Now, in recent days, Mr. Zuniga has received some backlash, calling his credibility into question for conflicting statements he made about the case. However, I want to take one bit of detail from his interview with the lead attorney. In that interview, Gerardo stated that Shanquella can be seen on video convulsing. When I heard that, the hairs stood on the back of my neck. Interestingly enough, this detail is cited on the police report. It says at 4:20, Shanquella had a tonic-clonic seizure lasting less than a minute with sphincter relaxation, at which time Winter Donovan dials 911 requesting an ambulance. So in layman terms, she experienced a seizure and a release of bowels. This detail would be reasonable to believe, but the time is wrong. The chief medical examiner for Tarrant County, Texas, Dr. Kendall Von Crowns, who reviewed the assault video, says, in his opinion, in the video when Shanquella is whipped about by her head and dropped to the ground, he says that Shanquella stops displaying all purposeful movement after that, even though Dejanay continues to pound her. He says it is the flinging movement that killed her. He further explained that atlas luxation is a dislocation of the first cervical vertebrae, C1, which is located right underneath the skull. And when Shanquella was flung, that vertebrae slid out of place and was pushed into her spinal cord. He said this causes bruises to the spinal cord, but that the spinal cord bruising takes a little time to set in before it kills you. He also stated that she has a survival time period of 15 minutes, which is also noted on the death certificate, because the spinal cord is damaged and not completely torn. It is also further clarified that when the C1 vertebrae, which is right underneath the head, when it is dislocated, it means the head and brain are also dislocated from the lungs, the heart, and the other life-sustaining systems. According to spinalcord.com, among other symptoms of atlas luxation, there are 3 specific ones that I want to note because they are relevant to the report details of this case. They are trouble breathing without apparatus or assistance, ability to speak is reduced or impaired, and there is a loss of ability to control bladder and bowel functions. Each of these symptoms were present and documented in this case. In fact, our old friend Nazeer also told us that as soon as he got there, he rushed to her and turned her on her side and got a bag. Take a listen.
They told me she was not feeling good, so I instantly go to her, put on her side, get a bag.
This implies that she had bile or spew on her face and in her mouth. It also shows that she had already sustained atlas luxation and that a seizure had likely already occurred. So it is safe to speculate that after being flung in the video, Shanquella began to experience trouble breathing, inability to speak, and loss of control of her bowels. And the seizure that ensued at the time of her death is a sign of her breathing starting to fail. And it is also safe to speculate that Shanquella passed away within 15 minutes from the flinging action and not 3 hours later from cardiac arrest. So now we have 4 key points of reference for the timeline that we can add to the other details that we know. We know now that a service worker found her. It was confirmed by the AG. We now know that the flinging of her was the fatal blow. Dr. Kendall Crowns confirmed that. And we also know that she died within 15 minutes of that blow. And then lastly, we know that she had a seizure and a release of bowels upon her death. Our friend Nazeer has come through for us a lot in this video, and he will not disappoint here either. Nazeer tells us he made a call to everyone after he landed because he needed the address. I estimate the call to be around 12:26 p.m. Mexico time. As his flight was scheduled to land at 12:19 p.m., it actually landed a little bit early, as you can see here in the image. In the next clip, you're going to hear Nazeer say that he landed at 2:16 p.m. because his device was not set to Mexico time, which is 2 hours behind North Carolina's time. Let's take a listen.
So I get off my flight around like 2:16 Mexico time. I guess we 2 hours ahead. 2:16 p.m. I make a phone call. To everybody who there. Like I need the address. So during this phone call, that's the first time I heard that Kula wasn't feeling good.
Nazeer says himself that it took him about an hour to arrive to the villa because traffic was bad. Take a listen.
But when I got there, it took us an hour. My taxi driver, it took us an hour to get to the villa because there was traffic. I don't know why.
Nazeer's flight landed at about 12:16. We give him about 10 minutes to get out of the airport and get situated and locate his taxi. That means that he made a call approximately 10 minutes later, 12:26 p.m. And he says here in the clip that it took him an hour to actually arrive at the villa, which puts him arriving at the villa at approximately 1:26 p.m. Nazeer states that he got there and an hour later, the nurse arrives. Take a listen.
Tell me nothing crossed my heart and hope to die on this Bible right here. I don't know nothing. I didn't sit and make no alibi. I didn't need to have time. I got there an hour later. The nurse came in the door.
Nazeer's own admission places him at the scene before the call for medical help. Nazeer says he got there and an hour later, the nurse arrived. In the police report, it says they called for medical help at 2:13 p.m. and an hour later at 3:15 p.m., the doctor arrived. And by that time, the fight had ended. 15 minutes later, Shanquella passes away. Then the friends set it up to look like she had fallen in the bathroom because she drank too much. The cleaning staff discovers her. And in Nazeer's attempt to cover Shanquella's actual time of death, he unknowingly reveals more signs and symptoms that she had passed before he arrived. She had bile on her face. She was not speaking. Shanquella was dead. Stay tuned for part 2 and part 3. Part 2 will be the timeline, and part 3 will be why the doctor and the officers would go so far as to lie on the police report. You are truly not going to believe what I found. Shout out to all of my sources: the lead attorney, Gerardo Zuniga, Dr. Kendall Von Crowns, Nancy Grace, El Independiente newspaper, Gerald Jackson, spinalcord.com. There's a link in the description to all of their wonderful channels, podcasts, and pages. Justice for Shanquella.